If you're over 65 and still driving the same way you've been driving for decades, 2026 could be the year you get fined, flagged, or even lose your license without ever realizing you broke a new rule. The most dangerous part is this. Many of these new driving rules don't feel new at all. They look like the same roads, the same signs, the same habits you've trusted your entire life. But underneath the surface, the system has changed quietly, automatically, and in some cases, permanently. Hey everyone, welcome back to Move to USA. I know this channel usually focuses on immigration news and policy changes, but today we're talking about something that affects millions of Americans, especially seniors, in a very practical and immediate way. Starting February 2026, multiple U.S. states are rolling out enforcement rules that don't rely on warnings, discretion, or even direct police interaction. Cameras, algorithms, and insurance-linked databases are now doing the watching. That means you can be a careful driver, obey the speed limit most days, never touch your phone behind the wheel, and still end up paying hundreds or even thousands of dollars because of a single moment you didn't know was now illegal. Before we dive into these critical changes that could affect your driving privileges, your insurance rates, and your financial security, I need just 2 seconds from you. Please hit that like button right now. This information is vital for every driver, but especially for seniors and their families. And helps the algorithm push this video to more people who desperately need to see it before they get caught by these new rules. Your one click could save someone from a very expensive and stressful surprise. This video is not about creating panic or fear, it's about awareness and preparation, because the drivers getting hit the hardest right now aren't reckless teenagers or habitually dangerous drivers. They're experienced drivers who assumed the rules hadn't changed, who trusted their decades of safe driving history to protect them, and who are now discovering that experience alone no longer provides any protection when enforcement is automated. Here's what makes 2026 fundamentally different from every year before it. In the past, when driving laws changed, you usually heard about it clearly. There were news stories explaining the changes, warning periods allowing drivers to adjust, and grace phases where first-time violations might result in warnings rather than citations. In 2026, the shift isn't really about brand new laws being created. It's about new enforcement mechanisms being deployed. The rules you think you understand are now being interpreted more aggressively, enforced more precisely through technology, and punished more expensively than ever before. And for seniors specifically, that matters more than for any other age group because the consequences ripple much further, affecting insurance rates that are already high for older drivers, license renewals that are becoming more complex, and even triggering medical reviews and identity verification processes. Across the country, states are under enormous pressure to improve road safety statistics, recover infrastructure funding that's been declining as fuel tax revenues drop, and reduce liability exposure for municipalities. Their solution has been comprehensive automation of traffic enforcement. Automated enforcement doesn't care how long you've been driving safely. It doesn't care about your completely clean record spanning 40 or 50 years. It doesn't issue friendly warnings. It doesn't give you a chance to explain the circumstances. It simply records what happened, generates a report, and forwards the violation directly to your insurance company or your DMV file. And once that happens, fixing the mistake or appealing the decision is no longer simple or straightforward. Many drivers operate under the assumption that if something were truly serious or if they had actually violated an important rule, they would be notified clearly and promptly. But in 2026, notification often comes after the damage is already done. A ticket arrives in the mail weeks later. A registration renewal is suddenly and unexpectedly denied. An insurance bill quietly jumps 25% with no explanation beyond a vague reference to a driving incident you barely remember. For seniors living on fixed incomes, these aren't minor inconveniences that you can easily absorb. They're budget-breaking surprises that can force impossible choices between essential expenses. What makes this situation even more challenging is that some of the most impactful changes are not happening nationwide with consistent rules. They're happening state by state, county by county, sometimes even city by city. What's perfectly legal where you live may trigger an immediate citation the moment you cross a state line or drive through a different jurisdiction. This is where most people get caught completely off guard. They rely on what's always been true. They rely on their experience and their understanding of how things work. But experience no longer protects you when enforcement is automated and when the rules have fundamentally changed without adequate public communication. The automated system doesn't care that you've driven safely for 40 years without a single accident. It doesn't care about context or circumstances. It only cares about what the camera, the sensor, or the database recorded in that specific moment. That's why so many drivers in early 2026 are saying exactly the same thing when they receive unexpected citations. I didn't even know that was illegal. I had no idea the rule had changed. Nobody told me this was no longer allowed. And that's exactly why this information matters right now, before February becomes March, before renewal notices start arriving, before a simple routine errand to the grocery store or the doctor's office turns into a financial and legal headache. Because once a violation is logged into the system, you can't talk your way out of it the way you might have been able to with a police officer who pulled you over. You can't explain the context or the circumstances to a camera. You can't appeal to common sense or reasonableness with an algorithm that's simply following its programming. Prevention through awareness is the only real protection left for drivers in this new environment. Let's start with the enforcement change that is spreading faster than almost anything else nationwide, and it's already catching tens of thousands of drivers completely off guard. Distracted driving is no longer being treated as a secondary issue or a minor infraction. For years, many states followed what was called secondary enforcement for cell phone violations. That meant an officer couldn't pull you over just for holding your phone or using it while driving. They needed another reason first to initiate the traffic stop, maybe a broken tail light rolling through a stop sign or crossing the center line. That layer of protection and discretion is rapidly disappearing across the country. As 2026 rolls in, more than a dozen additional states have officially moved to primary enforcement of distracted driving laws. And even states that already had hands-free laws on the books are now enforcing them far more aggressively than they did in previous years. What that means in real life is simple and uncomfortable. If an officer sees a phone in your hand or even sees the glow of a screen on your lap at night when they pull up beside you at a traffic light, that alone is now enough to justify a complete traffic stop. No speeding required, no swerving needed, no other violation necessary, just the presence of the phone in your hand. What's making this particularly tricky for experienced drivers is that enforcement guidance has dramatically expanded what legally counts as use of a mobile device. It's no longer limited to just texting while actively driving down the road. Holding your phone to check directions, even if you're glanced at it for just a second, scrolling through a playlist while you're stopped at a red light, tapping a screen to dismiss a notification while traffic is paused in a construction zone. All of that can now qualify as distracted driving under updated definitions being enforced in 2026. This is where many experienced drivers, especially older drivers with decades of safe driving history, get tripped up by assumptions. For decades, stopping at a red light felt like a safe pause in the driving process. You weren't moving, so in your mind, you weren't really actively driving. But the law no longer sees it that way at all. If you're in the driver's seat in control of the vehicle with the engine running and your phone is in your hand for any reason, you're considered to be actively operating the vehicle, even if your foot is firmly on the brake and you're completely stationary. That single assumption that stopping means you can briefly use your phone has changed the legal landscape dramatically. The penalties are no longer symbolic slaps on the wrist. We're not talking about a $50 fine that you grumble about and then move on from. First-time citations in many jurisdictions are now landing in the $200 to $500 range. And that's before court fees, administrative search charges, or any other add-on costs. But the ticket itself isn't even the real problem or the biggest financial impact. The real damage shows up quietly later, often months later, when your auto insurance policy comes up for renewal. Insurance companies now treat distracted driving violations as high-risk behavior, similar to speeding violations or at-fault accidents. Industry data clearly shows that a single distracted driving citation can raise your insurance premiums anywhere from 15 to 30%, depending on your insurance company, your driving history, and your location. And that increase doesn't just apply for 1 year. It often sticks around for 3 to 5 full years. If you're currently paying around $1,500 per year for auto insurance, which is common for seniors, that's an extra $225 to $450 every single year. Over time, one quick glance at a phone to check a text message can cost you well over $1,000 in increased insurance costs alone. For seniors, this hits even harder than it does for younger drivers. Many older drivers already pay somewhat higher premiums, simply because of age-based risk models that insurance companies use. A distracted driving citation on your record compounds that affect significantly, and unlike some minor violations that might be forgiven or removed early if you complete a defensive driving course, distracted driving citations are rarely forgiven or removed from your record before the full time period expires. Once it's officially on your driving record, it stays there and continues affecting your insurance rates. What's especially frustrating for many drivers is that these violations are completely preventable with very small, inexpensive changes to your habits and your car setup. If your vehicle doesn't have built-in Bluetooth connectivity or voice controls, this is absolutely the year to stop improvising and making do. A simple dashboard mount or vent mount that keeps your phone visible but out of your hands costs less than a single tank of gas. Most modern smartphones, even older models, can make phone calls, read text messages aloud, and provide turn-by-turn navigation without you ever touching the screen. It takes a little time to set up properly and a little adjustment to get used to voice commands, but it's infinitely cheaper and less stressful than dealing with the alternative of citations and insurance increases. Another critically important adjustment is purely habit-based and costs nothing except awareness. If you're stopped at a traffic light, you need to consciously train yourself to treat that moment as still actively driving. Keep your hands on the wheel. Keep your eyes looking forward at the road and traffic. Keep your phone completely untouched. That single mindset shift alone can eliminate the most common type of distracted driving citation being issued right now, because enforcement officers aren't just looking for obviously reckless behavior anymore, like someone swerving while texting. They're looking for technical compliance with the letter of the law. And in 2026, technical violations are costing drivers real money. Let me shift now to talking about speed enforcement, because if you think speed limits are still being enforced the same way they were 5 years ago, the next information is where things get very serious. Automated speed enforcement has existed in various forms for years, but in 2026, it's entering a completely different phase of sophistication and coverage. This is no longer about a few fixed cameras positioned near busy intersections in major cities. States are now rolling out AI-powered speed monitoring systems, especially in construction zones and school zones, and they are specifically designed to operate with precision that leaves absolutely no room for human error, judgment, or explanation. In states like Michigan, these systems are already fully active in work zones across major highways. The cameras are paired with sophisticated radar technology and timing software that measures your exact speed the moment you enter the designated zone and tracks it continuously as you pass through the entire area. If workers are present and you exceed the posted limit, even by a small margin, the system automatically records your vehicle, captures your exact speed, photographs your license plate, and generates a citation. There's no officer making a judgment call about whether to pull you over. There's no warning wave from a construction worker. There's no opportunity to slow down when you see enforcement ahead. The citation simply arrives later, quietly in your mailbox, often weeks after the incident. What makes this especially dangerous for experienced drivers is how these construction zones actually operate in practice. The cameras are only active when workers are physically present, which sounds entirely reasonable and fair on the surface, but many drivers don't realize how narrowly that condition is legally defined. A single worker standing behind a concrete barrier hundreds of feet from traffic is technically enough to activate the entire system. Temporary signs indicating a work zone may not look noticeably different from inactive zones you've driven through dozens of times before without any workers present. And because many of these zones shift locations from week to week as construction projects progress, relying on your memory of where zones are located is no longer reliable at all. The penalty structure is also specifically designed to escalate quickly. In some states, the first violation you receive is issued as a warning notice, which actually gives drivers a false sense of security. They think the system is reasonable and forgiving. The second offense often triggers a civil fine of around $150. The third violation can jump dramatically to $300 or significantly more. While some states currently classify these automated citations as non-moving violations that don't add points to your license, other states are already sharing the violation data directly with insurance companies, which means even if your license isn't officially affected with points, your insurance premiums may still increase substantially. The safest approach in 2026 is to treat every single construction zone as absolute and non-negotiable. If the temporary sign says the speed limit is 45 mph, you drive exactly 45, not 50, not 48 to keep up with traffic, not just briefly passing through at a higher speed. These automated systems are calibrated for exact speed thresholds with very little margin built in, and the flexibility that once existed with human enforcement has completely disappeared. So let me ask you directly, are you aware of these new enforcement rules in your state? Have you or someone you know already been caught by one of these automated systems? Are you taking steps to protect yourself from unnecessary citations? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single comment, and your experiences and questions help me understand what content would be most valuable in future videos. If this video helped you understand what's changing with driving enforcement in 2026 and gave you practical strategies to protect yourself, your license, and your finances, please smash that like button right now. This information is too important to let it get buried by the algorithm where people who need it most won't see it. And if you haven't subscribed to Move to USA yet, please do that immediately and turn on the notification bell. While this channel focuses primarily on immigration news, I also cover important policy changes that affect daily life for Americans and immigrants. And staying informed about changes like these driving rules can save you thousands of dollars and enormous stress. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. I know driving rules aren't the most exciting topic, but they have real financial consequences, especially for seniors on fixed incomes. The key takeaway I want you to remember is this: 2026 represents a fundamental shift from human discretion to automated enforcement. The margins for error have shrunk dramatically, and assumptions based on decades of driving experience no longer protect you. Take the time to understand the specific rules in your state, adjust your habits accordingly, and share this information with family members who might not be aware of these changes. Stay safe out there. Drive carefully.